Okay, we are here for an exciting session, our first honest talks with Changemakers. And why I say honest talks is really how much honesty are we getting today, right? It's really hard to tell, truth from fiction. And it's important that we're looking to those leaders that we trust and that we know are going to tell us the truth of our own experiences. So today I'm going to bring to you Jenn Tardy, who is a wonderful, honest expert around diversity recruitment. And I'll tell you much more about her. But first, I am a part of Stanton Adams Consulting. My wife and I started it in 2010 as a way to give resources and consulting to organizations. In 2020, we also decided to open the Diversity Institute, which is specifically designed to help DI, HR, practitioners and other leaders build their skills around cultural competency. So really excited to be able to continue to be going strong through all of this. All right. And so just want to also mention our upcoming program. So those of you who are close to us know that I have been behind the scenes in the lab developing a new framework for how we can look at diversity, equity, and inclusion through the lens of talent management and performance. And it's a way for us to do the DEI work, to get to those DEI outcomes without saying the DEI, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we're trying to get to those outcomes. So by any means necessary. Leadership by Design is a manager program specifically developed for emerging and new managers or those who really want to just build those foundational managerial skill sets in today's world. We're going to talk about DEI, but we're going to talk about all the things that you need to really set the right culture for your employees to maintain a great culture during this really difficult time. All righty. So now we're here to talk to a wonderful friend of mine. And just to give you a little background, Jenn Tardy and I met on LinkedIn, seriously. Many years ago, she reached out to me on LinkedIn, or maybe I reached out to you. I'm not sure how it ended up, but we got connected. And like right away, she was one of those people that I'm like, oh, wow, I feel like I know her. Like, did we grow up together? Like, wow, we really have a lot in common. And she got a chance to come into the organization I was working with and just did some amazing work in training the recruiters, many of the hiring managers, as well as the HR business partners on how to really look at recruitment from a holistic standpoint. And from then on, I have been a total fan for this lady. So first, I want to give you your flowers. And I know this is sometimes uncomfortable for speakers, but I'm going to give you your flowers right now by sharing your background. So for those of you who don't know this wonderful woman, Jenn Tardy founded Jennifer Tardy Consulting, better known as Team JTC, to help organizations find, attract, and hire more candidates from historically underrepresented backgrounds. Through her hashtag hiring success programs, Jenn has helped countless companies talk openly about underrepresentation, removing bias from their hiring processes, and building more inclusive workplaces. And she doesn't just work with employers. She has also worked a lot with those who are in that career transition space, which there are a lot of right now. And particularly, she's guided lots of folks from different communities, women, people of color, people with disabilities, veterans, LGBTQ+, right? So everybody who has questions about how do I navigate today's workplace in terms of recruitment, she's the person to go to. So Jenn is based in Maryland and her firm is internationally recognized. She brings deep expertise, multiple HR and DEIB certifications, and she's even been named a LinkedIn top voice, y'all. So if you're not connected to her on LinkedIn, get to it right now. At her core, she's passionate about making diversity make sense and for everyone that's involved. So please join me in welcoming Jenn Tardy, y'all.
I so appreciate you.
You can show it in the chat as well. So excited to have you today.
You know, it's interesting because
Yes.
you had me thinking about when we first met, and you're right. It was a LinkedIn inbox message, and you were looking for someone to speak to speak to something. And then it turned into not just a partnership, like a mutually beneficial partnership. We've been supporting each other through the years. And even, I don't know if I've mentioned this to you, Cecilia, but at that time, much of my work, like you just said, was with job seekers. And I had already developed curriculum for recruiters. But that conversation and partnership helped me to get off of my butt and to put it out there for recruiters, which I appreciate you for. So let me exchange some flowers with you this morning. So thank you for that.
I love it. I love it. Well, I love watching what you're doing because you're always on the move. You're always thinking about what's next. But before we get into the heart of all the book and everything else, I would love to just hear more about Jenn. So beyond your bio, what do you want people to know about your business, child?
You know what's interesting? Somebody said to me one day, they were like, in everything that you do, it's almost something with social impact. And I was like, huh, I guess I didn't even realize that I'm naturally moved toward things that can just, I guess, sort of change the world or change how we think about the world. So, you've already mentioned the my research and training company, JTC. But I'm also co-owner of a behavioral health clinic out in Chicago called PWP Health. Did I ever tell you that, Cecilia? Oh my goodness gracious. Yeah.
Okay. Always doing something. I
I'm
love it.
always
I
doing
love it.
something. And so, yeah, and we help people who are Medicaid eligible to get connected to community resources too. And so every now and again, right, shout out to Chicago. So every now and again, when someone reaches out to me to speak about increasing diversity, in the mental health industry, I'm like, oh, I can bring two of my worlds together. So I enjoy that as well too. But yeah, the biggest thing to know about me is that I genuinely care about how we can reframe our thinking in a way that can make this world a better place. Um, there you go.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so when we talked, I was like, okay, we're in the middle of DEI hysteria,
Yes.
right? And you are
Yeah.
now writing this book, publishing
Yeah.
this book.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
so why is now the moment? Is now the moment? What
Yeah.
do you think about the moment?
Right. It's funny. I remember so my book to everyone who's in the audience, it was published June of this year. And I remember, maybe 8 months before it was published, I'm talking to the publisher. Because for those of you who ever traditionally publish a book, you've written this book maybe a year prior, and the publishing process takes a long time. And I remember talking to the editor, the publishers, and I was like, "Hey, you know, the whole administration is about to change. Like we were on the precipice of learning who the new president was going to be, and so a part of what was really important to me to think about and process for myself is how can I ensure that people understand that what I'm talking about in this book is timeless and how it's even better for today than it probably would have been, last year.
Hmm.
And the easiest way for me to even explain that is our mission at JTC is to help organizations increase diversity and retention without harm. So that even that whole little those two words, the without harm, has always put us in a place of being ready for today in our conversations. So even when you look at the very first line of the book, where I'm saying, I am not diverse. And it's like,
Right.
well, what do you mean? What do you
Ooh.
mean? And where I say, I alone am not, I alone, thank you, am not diverse, because an individual cannot be diverse. You're not innately or inherently diverse. It takes two or more. Right?
Yeah.
When as we're talking about the how do we teach this without doing more harm, it's forced us to really demystify to uncouple conversations, to really just tell the truth in a different sort of human way. And that's why I think this book is great for now, because it's like, hey, let's talk about these things, but let's talk about it as if you're having a conversation with a friend over a cup of tea. This is a very complex conversation, but I'm not going to teach it to you in a very mundane way. I'm going to teach it as if you're my friend and you're curious and knowing, and I'm going to help you with that curiosity. A long answer to a short question, but
No, I think that, and it's so true. And I think that's why it's so easy to work with you, is because you take sometimes really complex ideas and really boil it down to the basics so that you understand what it is that, that we're doing even, and
and,
get clear about like, what are we even measuring?
and the funny thing is, that's how I learn. I'm that person. You know, some people are like, "Well, I didn't want to ask the question because the question may have seemed dumb." I'm like, "Nope, I have a question." And I'm
That's
going to
right.
prepare the rest of the class that this is probably going to seem like a silly question, but I'm going to ask it anyway because I learn in a very layman sort of way, on purpose. On purpose, I'm going to ask the question in a very elementary way so that I can really get it and break it down and understand it, because it makes it, again, seem more casual when I'm explaining it to other people. Just like this whole notion um, of of why it can be a challenge when you're calling an individual diverse, because
Yeah.
that's not the definition of it, right? And so even within our organization, we tend to use different terms, more effective language, like, are you from a marginalized community? Are you underrepresented? Are you underestimated? Things that better describe your experiences. But when you call an individual diverse, you're othering them. You're like, oh, you're the other group.
Yeah.
And that by itself, that language, that communication starts to divide us. And so one of the things that I teach in my training is around, I focus on underrepresentation. If diversity includes all of us, then underrepresentation highlights the gaps. Where do we
Mm,
have gaps within our organization? And how do we all come together collectively to address the gaps that we see? That's it.
I love that. Oh, I love that. So those so simple. And I totally relate to what you're talking about with the term diverse. I remember so many times, I'll be in organizations and they're like, we need somebody diverse.
Yes.
Cecilia, get in here, get
Yes.
in the
Yes.
picture.
Right. And the biggest challenge is when I come into organizations that train other practitioners, or organizations that are training people within their organization, and they're using the language ineffectively. And notice again that I'm not saying that you're using the language wrong or you're using language
Right.
right. Instead, we use effective versus ineffective language, right? Because effective to us means that you're moving people toward something more positive where you're trying to take them. Ineffective means you're either moving them away from where you're trying to lead them, or you're leaving people left out of the conversation. That to me is what ineffective means, and we talk all about that in the book as well too.
Yes, this is not about cancel culture. It really is
Yeah,
about like, how effective are you? I really like your framing on
yeah.
that. That's really cool.
And
And for
can we get more effective? Yeah.
For those of you in the audience, I know you probably have questions bubbling up. Please put them in the chat. Michelle is monitoring the chat and we'll be collecting all those questions to be able to ask Jenn towards the end. So keep dropping those questions in there. All right. So I want to hear a little bit more about the book, as I'm sure everyone here does. Now, I've had a chance to read it, but I would love to hear from you. Like, what are some of your takeaways? What is the message that you really want people to take away?
So, in the conclusion of the book, I actually say, if history were written by the victors, the future belongs to the visionaries. So, as I'm writing this book, a researcher on my team, he had actually completed his dissertation, and he had mentioned, he was like, Jennifer, history is written by the victors. And I was like, huh. And we almost sort of move beyond that conversation. I was like, no, 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 let's go back to that for a second. History is written by the victors. So, when battles would happen, or, just when different things would happen, whoever won got to tell the story that they wanted the world to understand at that time. And they got to tell it in their way, even if it wasn't always the truth. And
Yes.
that's this space that we're sort of in today, where history was written by the victors, and we're almost in this weird space of what version of history do we want to tell. And to me
Yeah.
it seems very simple that just tell history the way that it actually happened, and then allow people to sort of to move where they want to move from there. So, from a takeaway of this book, if history were written by the victors, the future can be written by the visionaries, those who have a different vision of where we want to go. And that's the whole feeling that I want people to walk away when they're reading this book. Now, in more logical terms, this book is all about how you can use your recruiting program to create an edge for your organization, a lead, a competitive advantage for your organization.
Yeah.
And so the way we frame it up is through the hiring process, how to find, attract, interview, select, engage, how to go through all of those steps, and where bias shows up in all of those steps, and how to think about mitigations for bias in those steps. But before we even dive into it, I always love to educate people. So
Yes.
the very first chapter is, how do I say this? And this goes back to using effective language. And then we started talking about unquestioned answers,
Yes.
unquestioned answers, um, and just some common things that we as humans don't really question, that that preserves an unequal playing field or an inequitable playing field.
Yes.
And then we go into the model of the find, attract, engage, and select. And then we talk about, well, once individuals are in your organization, even if you have inclusive programs, you've got to talk about an internal diversity recruiting program. Where's the bias that prevents people from getting ahead once they enter your organization? Uh, and, and I remember working with one client that was like, "Hey, Jen, we've done all the good work. We created inclusive programs. We have our ERGs. We've done all the things, but we still have employees, specifically from marginalized communities, who are still unhappy. How is this possible?" And then I'm like, "Because you forgot about equity, right? Because even in the most inclusive organizations where you're making connections and you're communicating your commitment to diversity, you're doing the trainings and things like that, they're still watching their peers get promoted
Yeah.
into positions in ways that they don't understand, because your messaging to them is, well, here at our company, we post positions, you apply, we interview you when you get ahead. But what's happening is, oh, well, such and such knew such and such from their network, and they happened to mention this open position, and oh, they applied, they submitted their resume, but no position was posted. And then all of a sudden, who remembers sitting at your computer and all of a sudden seeing an email that such and such just got a promotion to a position that nobody ever knew was open? So we have to have that conversation in here
Yeah.
too. So that's what this book is about. And I had a good time writing it. I tell a lot of personal stories in it as well, especially like about my dad and his experience in life too. So
Yeah.
I had a good time writing. Oh, one more
Yes. Yes. Tell us, child.
One
Tell
more
us.
thing. This is what happens when Cecilia and I talk, and I promise you all, I don't talk this much when it's just us. She has space to talk to. But the last thing that I'll say is that in each of the chapters, there's a section for job seekers too. And this is important, that even though I'm talking to workplace leaders, I'll then say, okay, if you're on your job search, here's how I want you to think about this message that I just gave to the workplace. Here's what I want you to think about, and here's what you can do about it as well too, because I'm always talking to both communities and I want them to be able to reach each other faster. So
I love that. I love that. And I love how you talk about, our own personal accountability is
Mhm.
around looking at those biases that we all bring to the table as human beings, right? But
Yeah.
then there's also this system of inequity. So it's not a person, right? It's these systems that over time have been built that structurally keep, certain groups out for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So I like that you're just helping us understand the complexity that this doesn't isn't just like post in the African American newsletter, post your jobs there and bingo, you're gonna, it's all gonna be solved.
Yeah, these are real things that human beings are experiencing that they're also trying to understand, well, why am I experiencing this? Why am I sitting at my desk on a Monday morning seeing a communication come out that my peer just received a promotion for a position that I was equally qualified for, but I never knew the job was available?
Yeah.
How does that happen? And they're asking these very real questions. And so, from the systemic standpoint, it's, well, where's your structure around how you think about internal opportunities? You know,
Yeah.
where does that, how can you ensure that any position that's available, people get to at least know about it and raise their hand if they believe that they're qualified and then get vetted as well too. So,
Yes.
have
I mean, I know a lot of recruitment departments that will push their ads outside, but no one on the inside ever knows about the
to.
jobs, right? So like that's your best, pool of talent right there to be thinking about. And sometimes we kind of bypass that. So
Yeah, at least allowing people, even if you believe from a talent planning or talent management standpoint that no one in your company is going to have the qualifications for it, being able to post it to allow people to self-identify and say, well, I think I do. Can we at least talk about it? And
right.
then being able to go from there, because even that opens a conversation of, here are the skills that we're looking for. Here's where I see there's a gap. But let us help you to figure out over the next year or so how you can fill how you can work to fill that gap. And that's where you create the loyalty, where you're
Yeah.
having those real conversations. They may not get that position, but at least now you're opening dialogue for a conversation on what that looks like. So
That's right. That's right. I love it. All right. So now I want to talk about a topic that I really love because I got to be a part of this experience that you created. Your early research in lived experience intelligence, you brought together a group of folks to be a part of a think tank and basically share their insights and expertise. And you invited me to be a part of that. And I'm so honored to be a part of it. And I still have the leather bound notebook that you sent everybody with the first published paper. This is amazing. So, and I'm going to ask you to just share a little bit more about lived experience intelligence. But I really resonated with this because I think about all the things that have happened in my life. Like I left home when I was 16. I got my GED, right? Like I didn't finish high school. Was on my own and dealt with a lot of different challenges throughout my life. And through those things, I know I developed skill sets, but
yeah.
those are never skill sets that I can talk to in a way that feels valid. So tell us about lived experience. And while she's doing that, if you want a copy of the lived experience white paper, you can go to the link that I have up here. Olivia is also going to post it for you in the chat. But LEI, tell us about
And
LEI.
just so you know, I also talk about it in this book as well too, for people that are interested in it. But let me actually take a step back, because I don't know if anyone can imagine what it could feel like to think about all the people that you admire in this space of DEI and being able to say, "Hey, will you come and be on this advisory panel?" And I'm in this group where the advisory panel is coming together, which includes Cecilia, and I think it was about 12 people. I can't remember the exact number, but like each time we come together, I'm like drooling. I'm like, oh, what do you have to say? And what do you have to say about this? So the whole point was, that I was developing this concept, this white paper about lived experience intelligence, which I'll talk about in a second. And then I brought this advisory panel together, and their charge was to pull it apart. Let's pull this all apart. Use your beautiful brains, pull it all apart, and then we can put it back together. Then let's pull it apart again. And then let's put it back to like really challenge this notion. So yeah, I was excited, Cecilia. Thank you for
Yes.
being a part of it. Now, with lived experience intelligence, do you remember how I was saying before that the way in which I like to learn in a very elementary way, and I ask the questions that I don't know that a lot of people feel comfortable asking. And so when I first started diving deeply into the world of diversity recruiting, all the data was there, and the data would say things like, increasing diversity it's better for your bottom line, and you have more innovative ideas, and there's just this data and statistics around how it just benefited the organization. And then I'm that person in the back that's like, but how? But how, how is this and I think a lot of the world just sort of said, okay, well, I'll receive it, increase diversity, it adds to the bottom line, but it wasn't that ellipses, that dot in between those two messages, it wasn't enough for me. And then the more I started talking to people, the more I started just unpacking this whole notion, in our work, I was like, it's because of lived experiences. And what people aren't getting credit for is the intelligence that comes with our own lived experiences. And I talk in our training a lot about how a lot of what we've had access to or been denied access to is also connected to all of the ways in which we identify. So when you go back to, how do you identify? And there are millions of ways, and even intersectional ways in which we identify, from our race, our sex, our sexual orientation, our gender identity. So there's so many ways. And the our identity alone is not where the intelligence is. It's the experiences, the lived experiences that are gained from it. So
Yes.
let's go back to this idea of through our identity, through how we identify, we either gain access to people, places, and things, and many times we're denied access to people, places, and things. All of that creates our exposure and how we see the world and how we show up in the world.
Yeah.
And again, I bring this lived experience back to this notion of people aren't recognizing that it's an intelligence that we're bringing to the table.
Mm.
Cecilia, I don't know if you remember when we did that LinkedIn audio, and I asked
Yeah.
the question of, I asked this question, hey, what does your lived experience intelligence make you more acutely attuned to? So when you walk into a room,
Yeah.
because of my lived experiences, I'm more uniquely attuned to what? And I think for some reason, you gave an answer. I don't recall that answer, but what comes up for you when I ask you that question again today?
I mean, like, tell me the question again.
What does it make you more attuned to? So my
Oh,
answer that day was I am very attuned to whose voice isn't getting heard. So
mm,
because of my lived experiences, which I now look at it, hi Melissa, which I now look at it as lived experience intelligence. When I walk into a room and we're having discussions, I'm more attuned to whose voice isn't getting heard, whether they're
yeah.
choosing not to speak up because maybe they process more, or maybe there are other people who lean in way more in the conversation. But I'm used to I'm used to not always having had my voice heard in the past. So I'm more sensitive to it now. And because I'm more
Yes.
sensitive to it, I can pick up on it and I can bring that value into any room. But you had said something in that meeting. I can't remember. So I'm
Yeah.
asking you,
I don't know which one I said then, but the first thing that comes up for me now is class,
okay.
because I grew up in New York City near Central Park West, but I also, came from a poor background. And so, that stark contrast is there. And when you come from different class groups, there's a power dynamic
Yeah.
that exists. And walking into a room, I can quickly pick up on those dynamics,
Yeah.
which has been really helpful for like when I've been brought into organizations and they're like, we have a race problem. And you kind of dig in and you're like, no, actually, you have a class problem because you're not listening to any of the admin assistants who are saying they want to have educational opportunities just like everyone else here, and they're not getting them. And so they're the keepers of all the information. Like they're a value that you're not really seeing right now. And until they are seen, they're not going to want to make room or be open to how do we make room for other groups. So that's what was holding them back. And yeah, so I could totally relate to that.
And that's an excellent example. And the more we can get individuals thinking about what are you more attuned to just because of your lived experience, intelligence, the more we begin to normalize this intelligence, right? And so how this plays out within a workplace is when we think about like primary, secondary, and tertiary lived experience intelligence. So primary lived experience intelligence is, hey, I've lived it. And there's nothing better than I live it, and it's all sort of shaped how I see and show up in the world. Secondary is more of, hey, my partner has lived it, and because we're partnered, I know some things about it, but I haven't personally lived it. Tertiary could be something like, hey, this is what I went to school to learn about, right? So I went to school to learn about it. I may not know a person, or I'm connected to a person who's lived it, and I may not have lived it, but somewhere along the lines I've learned about it. And how we begin to bring all of this into the workplace, um, it's recognizing that this value is already there,
Yeah.
but your employees that are bringing it are not getting acknowledged for that value, number one. And the second challenge is they're not getting compensated for that intelligence that they're bringing to the table
Well, you
because it's
see
not
now. Hmm.
because it's not acknowledged with the same level of intelligence as is, for example, a degree, or maybe I worked in this position before, and so I'm bringing that experience too. But have you
That's
ever been
real.
in a room before and heard someone speaking of, hey, I have this idea that I think is going to go over well within the organization, and then you're like, I don't think it's gonna. I think there's going to be some backlash, and in you in that moment, you may not even realize cognitively exactly what the issue is until you
Yeah.
stop and sort of think about it. But you were likely right. That it's like, this ain't gonna go over well until you begin to process it and think about it. So
I love it. And
there
it's
you
a
go.
really good way to move people away from the tokenism, right? Which
Yeah,
is, this thinking like we need to diversify, so we need to have many colors. We need to look around
yeah.
and see the many colors. But it's like what is that identity correlated with? Because that's actually what you're trying to get, not the identity piece so much as like the value that they're bringing, the knowledge, how they approach problems. Go ahead.
And thank you for saying that because I almost forgot to say it. And therein lies the one of the bigger challenges within diversity recruiting is that some organizations are looking at it as a count. That if I'm bringing in these people from these groups and the head count and the demographics have changed, then I'm checking that box, as opposed to being able to say that you know what that the real value is the intelligence that people are bringing in. So how do I help our employees to lean in with this intelligence, and how do we as employers tap in to that intelligence? And
Mm-hmm.
it's as simple as a question of, if anyone has lived experiences that they believe can offer value in this context, we welcome you to share that. So sometimes it's about just putting the question on the table because it's not normalized yet. And it's like, hey, do you have any lived experiences that you think can add value to this problem or challenge or even this initiative that we're working to do? Please lean in with that and
I
normalize
would help a lot of marketing departments, let me tell you
that part.
that.
That part.
All right, so I really want to get into it now, particularly around the bias, because we know that that is alive and well, right? Like we've spent a lot of years as a society unpacking unconscious bias, knowing that it is a normal part of who we are, is how our brain is hardwired, right? And so, what are the biases that we have to pay particular attention to in the workplace because they can really get in the way of your competitive advantage? And you name four of them in your book.
Yeah, yeah,
I'd
yeah.
love for you to unpack this.
So I'm so used to, and maybe people in the audience, you've been used to this as well too. Whenever we talk about bias, we hear about some of the common ones. It's like, oh, halo bias and things like that. And I'm like, well, we got to go a little bit deeper into this. Now, I know that we may be talking about this a little bit later, but I actually created this guide. I printed it out on my end, and this is free, right? Let me be very clear. It's the Platinum Hiring Bias Blueprint, where our organization, we looked at over 400 biases that we're not talking about because we're spending so much time talking at a very superficial level of like the top 3 or 4 biases. But
Yeah.
these are the ones that I just want us to think about from a recruiting standpoint. This is something that you don't have to print it off, but you can easily get to it for free. Now, as a part of that
And
conversation,
Olivia will be putting the link in the chat because I know y'all in the audience is like, I need to have it right now. I'm putting it right now. Put the
perfect.
link in there. Yeah.
Perfect. And so, but whenever I'm speaking, I'm at speaking events or I'm on a panel and I'm talking, I want to talk about things that we may not talk about as often. And thank you for pulling these 4 up. Do you want me to kind of go through them pretty quickly? Just
Yeah. If you
example of
just
each
high
one.
level.
So when you think about pedigree bias, when you think about pedigree, it's like, well, what family did you grow up in? What school did you go to? What, did you go to an Ivy League school? And what, so we're thinking about things like that. So even if we use, so yes, that's a bias in and of itself. Thinking, for example, that if you did go to this Ivy League school, um, let me say this differently, that if you did not go to this Ivy League school, that you're lesser than or that you'll bring lesser value. And what's very interesting, I remember when someone sat me down, and this is a long time ago, we're having this conversation about how there are a lot of people from marginalized communities who get accepted into Ivy League universities, but opt to go somewhere different for different reasons. And we
Yeah.
have to understand that there are a lot of, so I'm not here to say that, don't go to and don't interview people who go to Ivy League schools. But what I'm saying on my end is, I don't want you to believe that they're the only qualified ones for your open positions. You have to begin to
Yeah.
expand the pool. Competitor bias. I've worked at organizations before that were like, well, if someone has worked at this organization over here, if they have it on their resume, we don't want to interview them over here at our organization. And it's like, because in their mind, they're thinking that people who've worked at that organization are less qualified or a less qualified candidate. And it's
Yeah.
like, but maybe somebody went to work over there and realized that I don't want to work here either.
Right.
And you're
Exactly.
right, and you're missing out on highly qualified candidates in that way.
Yeah.
Um, the other one on here is around culture fit, which you do hear about more now, where we're encouraging people to talk about culture add. If you're looking for people who fit into your organization, that's how you begin to create more of the sameness within your org. And as a quick aside to this, and talking about this world of diversity recruiting and how we need to think about, difference, diversity, variety. I actually wrote this article at some point, and I was like, well, in all of this talk, is there any place for sameness? Is there any place ever for sameness?
Yeah.
Right? Because I want to ask the questions that I think people are thinking, but no one's
Yes.
out there. And then I actually say, yes, there is a place for sameness around values. If you're
Mm.
looking at shared values within your workplace, what are those shared values? And begin recruiting on shared values. But then again, my very next message from there is but how someone demonstrates a specific shared value could look different. And we've got to remember that,
Yeah.
right? So it's one thing to say, a shared value is teamwork, but am I considered less of a team player if I don't want to go to the bar in the evening with the rest of the team? We've got to be very clear on that. All right. So, um,
Yes.
culture add versus culture fit. What you're looking for, what can they bring to your organization that may not already be there today? And then professionalism bias.
Mm-hmm.
How often have we said have we said that we're not going to choose this person because they really weren't that professional? And I was reading this article a long time ago. I mean, maybe it was like 2020. That it feels so long ago.
Long ago, right?
But yeah, but I remembered reading about how it said that um, when you ask people, I guess they did a study on what does success look like. If you had to look at like identifying factors, and the outcome of this study, it pointed more toward heterosexual white males. When you think about what success looks like,
Yeah.
right? Which leads to and even people from marginalized communities had the same, feedback as well
Yeah.
too. And so when you start thinking about this idea of professionalism, how are we defining what professionalism does or doesn't look like? The idea of a professional, which was someone with a profession, and they had the skill set for that profession, turned into, you know, how you're packaged. It's evolved into this packaging. And the challenge that I have today when we're talking about who is or who isn't professional is that how we're defining what that package should look like is more closely geared toward heterosexual cisgender white men.
Yeah.
So I don't know whoever, okay, I'm gonna really date myself here and I don't care because this is
Go ahead. You gonna
the
talk about the 80s? Go ahead. Do it.
this is the 80s. Okay, who remembers the movie Baby Boom? I forget who the
With,
main character, I
with
forget her
Diane
name.
Keaton?
I think it is Diane Keaton, where
Okay.
where she adopts a child and then she moves to the countryside and all this sort of stuff. It's one of my favorite movies. I think somebody in the chat may know the name of the person. But if you recall, when the movie first opens up, you have Diane Keaton, who's an executive in the workplace, and she walks in a whole suit, because all of her other peers are all white males and they're dressed up in that fashion, right?
Yes.
Who has been in the workplace the longest? They've set the tone on what we need to look like in the workplace. And so the and so um my point here is that what we found is that the more closely you identify to, a cisgender heterosexual white male, the more close you're looked at as professional, and the further away you are from that, the more closely you're identified as unprofessional. And so
Mm.
it's important that as we're using this term professional versus unprofessional, there's bias that's hidden in there as well.
Yes. I see some correlations to class too. I mean,
Right.
oof,
Right.
yeah, that's deep.
Right.
That's deep. All right. So y'all got to get these tools here to really unpack the whole bias thing because there's so much more. Just knowing that they exist, that's not enough, right? We have to actually go deeper and we can't stop our learning just because of what's going on in this external environment. We have to keep learning right now because we have to be ready for the future. It's coming no matter what, right? So let's prepare for it. All right, so we're coming down to the last question here. So get your questions in the chat so that Michelle can share those with us. So this is my pet peeve here. All right, when a leader says, "I don't want to compromise on excellence in order to increase diversity," like I don't want to. Ooh, want to get on my nerve? Okay, but
Yeah.
we've all heard it. What do you do?
Okay. So I just want to make a note because I don't want to forget something else that I want to say here. Because there are two ways that I'd love to take this conversation.
Yeah.
One is when you're hearing people say, "I don't want to compromise on excellence in order to increase diversity." What they're usually saying, they're talking about meritocracy, around this whole idea of we want to hire people based on merit. Um, and the challenge is, and I wrote an article about this recently as well too. The challenge is we're viewing merit through the lens of an equal playing field. But when you're looking in reality, if the playing field is unequal, right? You can't really assess merit objectively. You have to first level the playing field. And leveling the playing field would mean, hey, well, what if we removed, so let's say the playing field was like this. But what if we removed your privileges, and what if we removed my hurdles,
Mm.
right? Because that's the biggest challenge is
Well,
that
I see what is a problem here.
yeah, that's the biggest problem to hiring based on merit, is that no one is acknowledging um, that there are certain groups that have privilege that allows them a head start, and no one is acknowledging that there are certain groups that have hurdles that have been placed. And we can use bias, to describe those hurdles.
Yeah.
And that is why equity is so important, that in order to truly hire based on merit, we've got to level the playing field so we can fairly assess merit. Now, the other thing that I'll say too is that there's a lot of conversations. There are people on the other end of it as well that are like, oh, well, in order for me in our workplace to increase diversity, we need to begin hiring for potential. And that can also be just as dangerous if it's premature,
Mm-hmm.
because I'll say to people that there's a time and a space to begin thinking about potential, but before we even get to potential, we've got to clear our lenses by which we are assessing people today. We've got to clear the biases from our lenses to be able to see that there are many people in front of you today that you're looking at as they may have potential. They're probably either qualified or overqualified. You just can't assess it because you're so stuck on how they've come packaged.
Yes.
Isn't that a good one?
Yes.
If we can't see beyond a person's effect to
Yeah.
really assess their skill, not just their skill proxy, but their genuine skill, then we're not even at a place to even think about if this person needs or has potential or not. So
That's
yeah,
so
that
true.
I'll leave that
So
there.
true.
But
Yeah. And you're not getting the top talent. Right, if
correct.
you're
You're
not checking these biases, right, you're not getting the top talent. And I heard someone say, diversity programs are meritocracy programs, which I thought was a interesting way to think about it, that without these programs, a lot of
That's
times, and
correct.
even with the programs, people are hiring the people that they know, the people that are in their
Correct.
circle. Right, are they the most qualified? No, but they feel like the right hire.
Correct.
Right, and
Correct.
so this kind of brings
Because
in some more objectivity.
you're absolutely right. And to your point, Cecilia, where you were like, you're missing out on lots of qualified people. There's a whole invisible pool of talent out there. And this again comes back to why we call it an edge. Because if you're able um to remove or at least see through your lenses more clearly, you're able to see that invisible pool of qualified and even overqualified talent that you can bring into your organization that a lot of people are missing out on. So that's the edge that I'm referring to on my end.
Well, child, let me tell you, y'all need to run and get this book. Well, you don't have to run, or you just get
You
online.
got it
It's
right.
real easy now, right? Get online, get the book. I know I'm going to buy several of them. People are
Thank
getting it for Christmas presents. Okay, y'all. So folks that are on my Christmas list, get ready. Celicia, your copy's coming. Um,
That is too funny.
but I love this. I love that you're doing this, that you're sharing this knowledge and information with everyone, and would love to take some questions. I think we have time for a couple. Michelle, What questions do we have?
Yeah, so we do have quite a few questions, mostly pertained to the lived experience intelligence. So I'm going to put one of the first ones in the chat here and also let you know. So one person had a question on how can you teach recruiters and HR business partners to measure for hires and promotions based on the lived experience intelligence? And also, how can we as employees articulate it in our performance reviews? So it's kind of that push pull that you're talking about, Jen, how it's not only employers that need to look for, but there's that advocacy part on the employee side with that too.
That's a great question. And I get this question a lot as well. So the first thing that I would say is we address that in the white paper as well too. So if you want more information outside of what I'm about to share, feel free to go there as well too. But as we're thinking about attracting people through a job description, as an organization, we have to think about who are our customers, the ones that we need, want, and even the future ones that we don't even know that we need or want. What are their lived experiences? Right? Because the easiest way to bring more value to the products and services that you have are to bring people into your organization that have lived experience intelligence of the customers or clients you're trying to attract and keep and all of that greatness. And so the more you know about your customers and their lived experiences, you can actually begin to think of the type of lived experience intelligence that you'd love to be able to have within your organization. And you can actually put that down within the job description. And you can ask questions around it to ask people more about their and you can really focus on it in this way where you can say, hey, our customers are this, and you can give a description of these. Here are the customers that we want to retain, we want to gain within our organization, and here's what you need to know about them. We are looking for people that have lived experience intelligence around this customer base. You don't necessarily have to. So remember, lived experience intelligence, there's primary, secondary, and tertiary. So please share with me about the intelligence that you have around this customer group, and then just go from there. You can infuse it in your interview questions and things as well. And then you can use that same question as people are doing their own performance reviews or they're giving feedback on the value that they bring to the organization. You can connect it again to your customers. And you can allow your people to sort of self-identify the intelligence that they have around it. And I mean, just it is amazing the things that you can learn just about the people within your organization and the intelligence that they have. Because you're not sort of focused on tell me your business, tell me your secrets. You really want to focus on the intelligence that comes from it. And you can let them sort of unpack that.
I love that. That is so good. And while you're answering questions, I'm also going to be sharing some resources. So pay attention to what's behind the scenes here. This is that big thick notebook that you were showing a little while
Yes,
ago.
yes.
Okay, so if you
It
want
doesn't
that,
look like that there, but this is if
go
you
ahead and get
decide to
that.
print it.
Yes. All right, give us another question, Michelle.
Yeah, so you kind of already started hitting on this, Jen, but this is going to get it a little bit more in depth. So people were wondering, this was more of a statement, but this was kind of like a add-on or a mini conversation that happened in the chat. How LEI should be folded into the interviewing process. But it sounds like it's kind of twofold. You can either make interview questions that specifically target LEI, or instead of completely reinventing your interviewing process wheel, considering which interview questions would be the best to incorporate the principles of LEI to get them revealed during an interview. So what are some interview questions that people can either add in to their processes, or they could consider just reworking some of their existing interview questions to get LEI embedded into them?
I think I have some questions within the white paper, but I cannot recall. However, so to not overcomplicate it, it goes back to what I was sharing a second ago around, I'd love to know, you would set up what lived experience intelligence means to your organization. You would also speak to the client base and explaining more about them. And then you would invite them to share more about their lived experience intelligence in context to the clients that you have within your organization. And so I would probably simplify it in that way. I wouldn't overhaul your interview program. It's really about just adding that one particular factor to it and just going from there. You can fine tune it from there.
I love it.
It really sounds like just adding in, just seeking to understand, I guess, is like the biggest thing. If somebody says something interesting where it's like, I haven't considered that kind of maybe perspective on that, and just asking more about it.
Yep. And I wouldn't tell the candidate what intelligence looks like to you. I will leave it open so that you can hear what intelligence in that area of lived experience looks like to them. Because you're going to confine it. If you're like, I'm looking for this type of intelligence, you're going to confine. But if you allow them to tell you, it's like, I didn't even see it that way. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You just let them tell their story.
Really sounds like a discovery process.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Wow. I mean, that's the hour already. I can't believe this.
Already.
Woo! Okay, I got all my questions in. Sorry, y'all. We didn't get to all your questions, but this is not the end. You can also have your conversation with Jenn Tardy. Here is another opportunity for you to get involved with the work that she and her team are doing. The Increased Diversity Academy. There's tons of classes. And let me tell you, I take many classes from JTC. I've been certified as a diversity recruiter through her certification program, and it's not easy. I've been in the field for 20 years. I had to take that test twice. So it's hard, but you know that you're actually getting your money's worth when you go through it, because you're like, oh man, I'm building these skill sets that are so important. Please reach out to Jenn. She works with companies. She also works with individuals. She's got an awesome team. So anybody you work with over there is going to be great. Any final words, Jenn?
I sincerely appreciate you for having me here. You asked some of the best questions, and thank you for just being able to give people like me a platform to really tell their story. So thank you.
Awesome. All right. Get the book, y'all, and have a great weekend.